Hey guys, all you need to improve is in your own games. This is a quote by a famous and classical chess master. So that quote means that the starting point for your improvement, for your progress, is going to be in your own games. You go there, you find the things you're doing wrong, and you improve those things. That's what this quote means, and that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. I'm going to answer questions like which games should you analyze, what time control games should we analyze, and how to get the best from the analysis of your own games. In general, we're going to see how to analyze your games. I'm going to give you tips, I'm going to give you some ideas, I'm going to talk about the process of analyzing your chess games and getting the most from this analysis. So, how to analyze your chess games? Let's talk about that. So, the first tip I want to highlight is focus on the games you lost. So, basically, when you play games, you win some games and you lose some others, and also you get some draws. So focus on the games you lost, because in those games there are more mistakes and there are more things you can learn. But of course, this does not mean that you don't need to analyze the games you win, because also in those games there would be mistakes, and of course also in the games where it was a draw. But in the games where you lost, there are mistakes for sure. There are things you did wrong for sure. So focus a little bit more on those ones. Uh, but still analyze as many games as you want and as many games as you can. But in the games you lost, there is more information in general that you can get and you can learn from. So that's my tip number one. I'm going to tell you my tip number two, and it is do not analyze bullet games. So here I'm going to talk about what kind of games you should analyze, what time control games. I would say not bullet games because they are like too fast. It's time pressure all the time. So probably you're making mistakes not because you don't know things, but because you cannot look at the board, right? It's just one move after the other. So again, do not analyze bullet games. That's probably wasting your time. But I think we could analyze time controls, for example, like Blitz is already fine because in Blitz you're thinking, you're looking at the board, and you're making mistakes. Uh, Not because you don't have time. You have some time to analyze, right? You're making mistakes because you don't know things. Like in the opening, for example, if you make mistakes, it's because you don't know the opening. In the middle game, if you blunder things or if you're missing things, it's also because you don't know those things. You will have some minutes to analyze. So that's the idea. Analyze blitz games. 3 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 seconds, and more time is totally, I could say, analyzable. After that, of course, keep in mind that once you are under time pressure, probably there's not much you can get from the analysis, right? You're making mistakes again because you don't have time to look at the board, not because you don't know things. But especially in the opening and the middle game, there is a lot to analyze, even if it is a blitz game. So yeah, keep that in mind. Blitz games, rapid, etc. You can analyze those games thoroughly, and especially focus on opening and middle game because in those phases of the game you had time to think. So my third tip is going to be about writing down your doubts and checking those doubts later. So for example, let's say you're analyzing the game and then you find a line where you could transpose to an endgame of, I don't know, king and rook versus king and bishop. So I don't know, something like this. So king and rook versus king and bishop. We all know, I mean, uh, we know that this is a win if you can get into something like this where you're trapping the king in this corner of the same color as the bishop, for example. So if you're curious about that, and then you say, "Well, how is this winning?" Right? How could I have won this endgame? The engine is saying it's winning, but I don't understand it. So you can just write that down as a doubt, right, and keep it in mind. And then later, if you're curious, here I want to highlight something. You take advantage of the curiosity, right? If you're curious about something, that's a good thing. Then you can analyze it and learn it later. So write down that kind of doubts, and then later uh, you go to some documentation and learn how to win this kind of endgame. So keep that in mind. Write down your doubts and check them later. Well, my next tip is about something I need you to keep in mind when you're analyzing your games. In general, when you're analyzing the games, you look at the position, at the board, your mistakes, your blunders, and then you try to learn from those, and that's very well, of course. There's something we need to keep in mind, and it is your time management. So pay attention to your time management, evaluate your time management when you take a look and you analyze your games. So the idea is that if you're playing too fast in key moments of the game, of course, you won't find the best move. So that's something you need to improve. At the same time, if you're playing like too slow and then you're under time pressure in all your games, that's something you need to improve for sure. So pay special attention to your time management. Is a key factor in your games. You cannot think too much, but also you cannot uh, have too much time to spare at the end of all your games. That means you're not thinking enough. So keep that in mind when you're analyzing your game. And my last tip is going to be probably the most important one. This is a really key tip, and it is find consistent mistakes and pay special attention to those ones. So when you're analyzing your games, for example, these are my games. I'm going to analyze this one. I'm going to analyze the other, all my games, right? Like 5, 10 games maybe, and then I'm going to find like patterns, like things that are repeated in many of the games. For example, maybe you're playing front in all the openings, right? Like either with white or with black, or no matter how I play in all my games, I have trouble in the opening. I'm getting out of the opening with disadvantage. I'm making mistakes in the opening. That means you have trouble with the opening. That means you need to improve your openings. You're bad in that phase of the game. So keep that in mind and try to improve that phase of the game if you're doing things wrong. Or the same thing, for example, about the mid game, right? Maybe you're just calculating things in the mid game, or misunderstanding the mid game and doing the wrong plan or the wrong ideas. So that can still happen for the mid game. So again, if you see a pattern where you're making mistakes in the openings always, or in the mid game always, well, pay special attention to that, focus on that, and then later you're trying to improve that. So find consistent mistakes. Also, I'm talking about, for example, if you see either chess.com or leashes, no matter where you analyze it, but then you see that in all the analysis you see problems, for example, with some specific tactic, like I don't know, you're missing mace in one. That's a problem, right? That's something you need to improve. If in all, I mean, in many games you see the repetition of this problem, that means that that's something very improvable. That's something you need to work on. Again, find patterns, find consistent mistakes, and try to work on those. I have seen this idea. Um, it works for some players, for some others it doesn't. But it's interesting. I'm going to say you can do it if you want, as you prefer. But you can draw a table, right? And you can write rows in the table, for example, with opening, mid game, end game, right? And whenever you see a mistake, you can count the number of mistakes in that phase of the game, and then in that way you're going to realize if there is a pattern, a repetition, a consistent mistake in some phase of the game. At the same time, you can include other rows in the table. For example, you can talk about time pressure, or you can talk about, I don't know, slow positions, or you can talk about sharp positions, or sky's the limit there, right? You can uh, highlight anything you want in the row, so you find patterns, things that you are doing wrong consistently in your games, so you can work on those a little better. So that's the idea. Those are my 5 tips to analyze your games. I hope these are helpful. And if it was like that, remember to subscribe, give me some like. Also, let me know in the comments your opinion. If you found some tip especially useful, it would be nice to read about that. Thank you so much, guys. Take care. I catch you guys in the next.